But I want to apologize for some of my lacks of absences recently, so I do apologize to everybody for that. So let's hit it off. I didn't print the. So we got a farm permit that we're going to first, Hillary.
Yes, we have Sarah here on the line, ready to describe to us her farm permit, and I can share the screen and pull up her materials. And Sarah, you can take it away and just describe what it is you'd like to do, and we will then ask questions from there.
Okay. So I'm applying for a permit to have 5 chickens. I have a coop and a run that the coop is, and there's pictures of the coop.
The coop is beautiful. It's beautiful, Sarah.
Oh, thank you. It's 5 across and 4 deep. And the run is 8 feet long by 4 feet and 5 feet tall. It's on the northeast side of my house. And the neighbors on that side are the closest people to where the coop is. And they have given a letter of support.
Right, I saw that.
This is their second home. They're here on the weekends. They have chickens at their first house, so they're very comfortable with the reality of what that is.
The chicken friendly.
They're chicken.
Chicken friendly.
Yep. So, and we plan to compost the chicken manure. I look forward to that, actually, having that for the garden. We have compost bins on the other side of our property, and plan on, or we have reinforced the run with hardware cloth to prevent anything from digging into it. So that in and of itself should deter anything, including rodents, from getting in. But in addition to that, I've been talking with a lot of people and doing research about just waste free or limiting the waste and how we feed them and bringing food in at night. So
Sarah, I have a question. This is Janet Drohan. I'd love to know, after you have some more experience with this, how the step food dispenser works for your chickens. You know, is this where they learn, like Pavlov, how to open it to get the food? Because that was something that was suggested to prevent rodent attraction. So I'd love to know how effective that is for you. You know, I mean, I think that's something that we would love to know in the Board of Health. Thank you.
yeah, there's 2 different feeding options that we're kind of deciding between. One is the step-on feeder, and then the other one is a bucket with a hole in it. It's a PVC, kind of part of a PVC pipe, where the chicken has to stick their whole head into the bucket. So
Okay.
spread the feed around, and that one is easy to bring in at nighttime.
I see. Okay.
It's not standing food outside. So there's pros and cons to each one. We're still trying to figure out what makes sense.
Right.
Hillary, so the neighbors are fine about everything. So
Yep, we
Anybody-
had, yep.
Yeah,
we
the letter
received
is
the letter.
lovely.
but it was
Yep.
good. Yeah.
Yep,
And I love the name of it, Sarah.
me too, me too.
Okay. Well.
Just one quick question for Sarah.
Yes.
Sarah, did you get your water test results back yet?
I haven't been notified, and
Okay.
just to say too, that picture is not, that picture is of the coop that the guy who built ours
Oh,
sent.
okay.
It's just a model, like you can see in there, his chickens are in there. That's not our coop, but ours looks just like it. Our run is on the other side. It's kind of a
Okay.
mirror to that, but yeah,
Does that mean yours isn't called the Breakfast Club?
we do not have that cute sign, but we do have the super cute solar lights.
Okay.
I love the lights. The lights are great. And the little door.
Mhm.
Oh,
Hillary, should we have a baseline water test from the neighbors?
Yeah, so she submitted it on May
did-
4th. Yeah,
I saw that, yes,
yeah,
yes.
it's been submitted. So we're just waiting on the results to come back.
What
to.
about the neighbor, the Malcolm, 65 feet away? Should he have a baseline so we can follow that?
Yes, we talked about
Okay.
sampling the neighbors well as well.
Okay, very good.
okay, well, we got a plan on, can I ask for a motion, please?
I'll make the motion. I move to, accept the, chicken coop and plan of Sarah Blandford at 30 Nugget Bluffs Road in Wellfleet. As designated in the plan, with water tests, with the results of the water test of both parties. And is that anything else, Hillary?
No, that's it.
Okay, great.
Got a motion, Nick, you want to second it?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Well, good luck with your chickens.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for your help.
Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, so now we're down to the wastewater discussion.
Perfect. So, we had a discussion on a proposed regulation, from the wastewater committee, seems like a couple months ago. And since then, we've continued to refine it and continued to work on it. And, I think we'd like to present that again. I have Scott Horsley on the line to present that to you. And in the meantime, the town of Truro sort of did an overhaul of their septic regulations. And I think they put some interesting things in there. So I circulated that all to you today, maybe yesterday. So I know you haven't had time to digest it, but I want you to have a look at it. It's been reviewed by town council, and it's been approved by the town of Truro. So it's a pretty good document. Some of the stuff is probably more strict than we had ever considered. They have a regulation in there where they require IA systems on any sort of lot that's upside down. And by upside down, I mean all of those lots that we grandfather right now that currently have 6 bedrooms on a 30,000 square foot lot are now required to upgrade to IA when they upgrade their systems to try and mitigate the excess nitrogen on those lots, because they're also served by drinking water wells in most cases. So that's probably the most novel thing that we've never considered in their regulations. They also, in their definition section, define bedrooms, much like we do, but then they take it that one step further and say, if your house has, 7 rooms, then 3 of those are going to be considered bedrooms.
Bedrooms, right.
So that's interesting too. It doesn't come up a lot, but I saw just the other day, I had someone advertise a house. They say 2 bedrooms, sleeps 8. So,
Okay.
I think we're going to see that more. And if we could better sort of define what bedroom is, by using that, because I think we know that some people are overusing their dwellings, probably not on a year-round basis, but in the summertime, it might just give us more legs to stand on when we actually go and try and enforce something. So food for thought there. And then again, they outlaw or prohibit cesspools and they're going to require all of those to be upgraded by January, I believe. So there's some really good things in there. And I think consistency with Truro is a good thing too, because we are right next to each other. We do a lot of regional work together. So I think 2 of us together is stronger than 1, and it makes it easier for those doing the inspections and installations and understanding the regulations as far as realtors go. So I think we should have a look at that. It has comments from town council, which I think is good. And we know that Truro approved it. So I think it's a good starting place for us to to start looking at that at our next meeting. So I don't intend for us to, you know, vote on anything tonight, but I want us to sort of start thinking in that direction and moving that way, because we do want to tackle the cesspool issue sooner rather than later. And we've been talking about it for a while. And so with that, Scott, I will pass it off to you. I don't see Kurt on the line, but if you want to go over what we've been working on.
Sure. Thank you, Hillary. And with the chair's permission, I'll share my screen. I only have 2 slides. One is a copy of the most recent draft of the health regulation, which I'm already thinking about editing, but I can show you that and just remind you where we were at. And secondly, I have kind of a site plan of the whole town that highlights some of the integration of all the various measures that we're proposing to the town to think about to accomplish this targeted watershed plan. So with that, I'll assume that I have the right to show my screen, and can somebody tell me if you can see this health
Yeah,
regulation?
We got it,
Yes.
we got it.
Okay, so this is, again, the last draft, and I'll quickly summarize it for your recollection, but we'll tell you in advance. Again, we're already thinking about some changes to that I'll try to highlight. But the last draft of the regulation tagged on to what Hillary was saying about cesspool upgrades, and think about any, as it says in this first section, and by the way, these notations were attempted to try to align with your existing enumeration of your regulation, but of course those may change, but that's what those numbers are about. So the first paragraph here, the intent would be when there is a repair and upgrade, perhaps a cesspool upgrade would be one of those upgrades that you're trying to accomplish, and certainly new septic going in, that the proposal here would be to require an upgrade to a so-called innovative and alternative septic. And as I'll get to in a couple minutes, there are 2 groups, in my view, of INA systems. The ones that are currently approved for general approval that are rated at 19 milligrams per liter. And then, as we'll get to in a few minutes, a new generation, if you will, of technologies that appear as though they're going to do much better than that. But in any case, the first paragraph essentially says, any new systems upgrades, cesspool, if you are in a sensitive watershed, and those are identified here as the MEP report, that you'd be required to do something other than a standard Title V system, which in my view is an investment in something that's probably going to need to be retrofit at some point in the future. The second paragraph, 609, provides an incentive program. And that is that these enhanced INAs that I mentioned, and many of them are achieving 5, 6, 7 milligrams per liter as opposed to the 19, currently have what's called provisional approval from DEP. What that means is anybody's free to put them in. They're approved for installation. In fact, there's no limit to the number that can go in, but they just haven't received the final rating on what the performance will be. But there are at least 3 of them that appear to be performing at 10 milligrams per liter or less at the so-called Cape Cod Septic System Test Center over at MMR, that I suspect you're pretty familiar with. George Hoyfelder has been running that research program for a number of years. In fact, one of the 3 technologies that we're identifying here is his development, which I'm referring to here as the layer cake, simply because that's what people are calling it. Anyways, that's the second paragraph. So the idea would be to provide an incentive. And in this case, the current proposal would be the town provide a financial incentive in around $12,500, which is located down, which is identified down here in the next paragraph. In fact, the discussion so far is maybe there's a couple or 3 different potential incentives to try to get people who are already coming in for an upgrade to take the next step, if you will, and put in one of these enhanced IA programs. One option would be the town provides a financial incentive. The $12,500 here is designed to cover the cost of the treatment technology itself, not the installation costs, not the landscaping, not the engineering fee, which in my view would already be something that the homeowner is going to be encumbered with when they have to come in for an upgrade or expansion. This is simply for the the marginal costs of the treatment technology. The second incentive could be to provide an additional bedroom. And then the third one would be, we've had a lot of discussions, I would say very good discussions with the affordable housing group in town, partly with regard to 95 Lawrence, but beyond that. And I've been reading carefully the most recent town's housing report, which seeks to try to integrate more affordable housing. So another possibility would be as an incentive, if the applicant is willing to provide an accessory dwelling unit as an affordable unit, perhaps that could be another trigger to provide this upgrade. That's essentially what the regulations said. The last paragraph deals with the potential that at some point in the future, what happens if a sewer comes along? And the town has a number of options here. The way this is currently written is that this would protect the homeowner. If they spend the money to do one of these upgrades, they would not be required to hook up with the town sewer, if in fact there is ever a town sewer, unless you deem the system to be out of compliance. So it really provides the flexibility to the homeowner and to you to decide on a case-by-case basis whether or not that IA investment is something that can remain, or whether or not that system needs to be hooked up. So that is the current regulation. And before we get into discussion of it, what I'd like to do is go to the next slide. There's only one more. And please let me know if you can see this map.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And this is a map that I actually updated today. I think Ryan Curley's on the call here, and thanks for attending, Ryan. In fact, I think Ryan might have a select board meeting to get to, so I want to give him a chance to speak here shortly. But this map, it provides an overview of the entire program that we have developed and are recommending to the town. And as I think you may recall and or
Can you make it
know,
a hair bigger, Scott?
oh,
Sorry.
sure, certainly. That's kind of, Emily's not here, so she won't be insulted if we cut off a little bit of churro maybe and focus on this part here. Is that good?
That's fine.
Okay, so I'll quickly remind you, the program that we're recommending is a integrated targeted watershed plan that involves both traditional and non-traditional technologies. And quickly, the list is, I'll just pan down here again. It includes the 95 Lawrence project. It includes a backup program for a wastewater treatment plant out at the transfer station. It includes the potential for some downtown sewers, which are highlighted here. It includes, just to skip down here, some habitat restoration projects, namely Mayo Creek Herring River, as well as Hawes Pond and some other salt marsh restoration projects. It includes, I would call, a quite limited and reduced program of aquaculture and shellfish, which we've been talking about with the Shellfish Advisory Committee. A number of stormwater mitigation projects, including the one that's pending out on Route 6 with the state DOT, and then of course the enhanced INA program that is included in the regulation. What I've added to this, as you can see in this upper notation, is cluster study areas. So I just want to talk for a minute about that. The program that's proposed out at the 95 Lawrence project came about, as you may recall, from a grant from the Cape Cod Commission to look at alternatives out there. The original plan was to put in a 19 milligram per liter INA system. And frankly, when I got involved in the program and I saw that, I kind of gave the timeout signal and I said, let's think about this. So I called the Cape Cod Commission, I talked to people in town, I said, let's think about options here. And as many of you or all of you may know, that has evolved significantly. And now the proposal is to build a neighborhood or cluster size wastewater treatment facility that would include not only the Affordable Housing Project 95 Lawrence, but 3 municipal properties that are adjacent and currently on Title V systems, as well as up to, I think, about 30 or 40 homes in the neighborhood that are on Title V systems. I'll just note all of this project is in the Duck Creek watershed, which is the most challenged one, or one of the most challenged ones in the town. So this project is really a wonderful opportunity for the town to show frankly the rest of the state that yes, it's possible to have affordable housing and clean up water at the same time. So I'm pretty excited about it, and I think there's some potential for it. That is an example of a cluster neighborhood wastewater system. And as part of my plan, I had identified the potential for more of these town-wide over the 25 or 30-year planning program, but I didn't know where they might be, so I simply put them in the plan as potential. In speaking with Ryan recently, he had a lot of very good thoughts about, yeah, maybe we can do a little more detail on this and try to identify some potential areas for this. And so what I've done is I've amended the plan. You can see this highlighting here over in the lower Cove area, over here, and then again down in Lieutenant's Island, 3 areas. And these are only meant for discussion. These are not meant to be the official proposal. But the point here is there are probably some other areas in town that might be served by one of these cluster neighborhood systems. So one of the amendments to the regulation that I'm contemplating and wanted to put before you tonight is maybe the regulation has an exception in it and postpones the requirement for upgrades or incentive subsidies in these study areas. The idea being that we wouldn't want to invest in an INA system and then a year or 2 from now say, we got to pull that out of the ground, we're going to do a cluster system. So what this would provide is a period of time, and I'm suggesting phase 1, because the plan as I have it drafted now is a 25-year plan in 5 5-year segments or 5 phases. So my thought would be that in phase 1, the first 5 years, that the regulation could be crafted and amended in a way that would not require the upgrades to INAs in these areas, and hold off for 5 years and give the town to give more thought to the potential for a cluster system like the one at 95 Lawrence. And then at the end of that 5-year period, make some decisions about where to go from there. So I'll stop there. I could say a lot more, but I think that's a quick overview, Hillary. And I mean, if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them, or the board. And again, I know Ryan is here and he may want to speak to this as well. So I'll stop there and I'm more than happy to answer questions.
Scott, it's Janet Drohan.
Yes,
Could you send us that map so we could see it?
Oh, certainly.
Great, thank you.
I'll do that. I certainly will do that. Yes.
And Hillary, do you want to let Ryan talk about his letter first?
He's got the board of selectmen, yeah.
Yeah, he can talk. I had a couple questions, but he can certainly go ahead.
Okay, so I think I largely covered everything I want to talk about in the letter. I don't know, if we adopt a regulation that allows opt-outs and is applied to the entirety of the town, it will create a lock-in where the only possible source reduction on site will be innovative alternative systems, even though they are not necessarily the most economical means of reducing source pollution. And when there's over a certain amount of density of, well, I say density of flow, we have a number of areas where we have businesses that have a really high flow volume, and they can kind of serve as anchors on cluster systems to provide sufficient flow to make it economical to hook up a number of the surrounding properties as well. And then in other areas, we just might have housing that's dense enough to justify a cluster system on its own. I would almost think of them more as neighborhood service systems, maybe, or something along those lines. The benefit of doing that is that as soon as those systems are installed, the impact's immediate rather than having upgrades happen here or there over time across the neighborhood. And it will also improve the water quality for a lot of the people who draw on the water. what else? I don't know. Standard IA systems, the gain of installing those is so marginal that it doesn't really make sense to ask a homeowner to bear that cost, because they're not a solution to the wastewater issues in Wellfleet. The amount of reductions that we need to make are significantly more than the reductions that are seen from upgrading from a standard Title V to a standard innovative alternative system. So that's basically it. My letter basically covers the figures, uses the Bowler report on the costs for 95 Lawrence Road, and then for the enhanced alternative, those are the best estimate costs. I think Scott will say that they're within line. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, Hillary, what do you?
I just had a question for Scott on cluster systems. The town does not own really any acceptable land on Lieutenant's Island to site a cluster system. Indian Neck, I wonder about that. Have you seen cluster system sited on private property? I guess I'm wondering, seems like that adds a whole nother dimension and layer of agreements, MOUs. Who's gonna want this on their land? I feel like we're gonna see a lot of NIMBY type situations like we saw in Truro when they were proposing their housing. And I guess I wonder too, where we've been working so closely with DEP on our plan, to now say to them, we're going to take 5 years and study this. When do we really think it's realistic to cite something like this? I guess I'm asking you as our consultant, is this realistic? Have we seen this in other communities? I don't know how we're gonna sort of talk this through to DEP.
Well, Hillary, thanks for that question. That's a very good question. And the quickest answer I can give you is yes, there are some examples. In fact, I've been directly involved in 2 of them that I'll tell you about. One of them is Willow Bend in Mashpee, who I worked for in getting a permit for the Cape Cod Commission, and they had to have a net zero nitrogen requirement under the Cape Cod Commission Act. So to achieve that, they built a upgraded sewer plant and offered it to their neighbors. And they hooked up their neighbors' existing Title V systems to meet that net zero. The second one is Kingman Marine in Bourne, same thing. They wanted to develop some housing on their property. And to meet net zero, they ended up actually not only designing, but building a wastewater treatment plant that was actually more than double the capacity of their needs and offering it to the neighborhood. Those are both on private property. So it is possible, but I agree with you. It's not easy. And you need to have a willing participant. So
No, and I think your examples are good, but we don't have commercial properties in any of these areas, or
yeah,
our residents. I can't see our residents jumping on board on a
Yeah.
private property. I mean, the lots are small. We don't have large lots.
right. No, I agree with you. And Ryan and I had a good talk about this today, I think. And I mentioned that to Ryan. I said, I think the 95 Lawrence project is very attractive. The costs are effective.
Right.
But my view of that is that the town was very opportunistic, that there was a high density affordable housing project proposed with a lot of local support. And that provided, and I'll use Ryan's term, that was an anchor for the project. So if there were to be other anchors that show up, like let's say one of the campgrounds decided they wanted to turn that into a higher density condominium complex, or let's say affordable housing project, 40B, that might be an opportunity, but they're hard to predict, I think. And my goal, what I've been trying to do with this plan, is make it as flexible and adaptive as possible. But you're right. It's hard to predict. These areas that I've identified, I should have mentioned when I showed you this map, the two, this one out here on the Cove and this one up here in Drummer Cove come directly out of the Woodard and Curran report. Those are two areas that they identified, as you probably remember, Hillary, having Title V issues in general and some private well issues. So they identified both of those as potential areas where maybe another solution might be viable. And Lieutenant Island is something that Ryan recommended to me because of the low lying area, depth of water, which I know will be an issue in areas of the town. And again, these are intended only as examples, but you're right. In fact, I would say if Ryan's still here, I would say you're both right. I mean, there is potential for this, but as I think you're in your question, Hillary, there's obstacles and constraints to these projects, and where you can actually pull off a good neighborhood cluster system, you have to have a unique combination of willing participants, including the town. So my view again is I think the enhanced IA program is, to me, a cost-effective alternative to a town-wide sewer. And I think that it's the way to go. I think that if there are certain areas of town, and I would really point to the downtown area in terms of my knowledge base as the most likely area, that there might be some areas of that town. And again, these two areas were identified as part of the Woodard and Curran and the Environmental Partners Report. So there's been a lot of thought put into this in the past. And I would have no problem, I think, going along with, I think what is one of Ryan's suggestions, and that is, let's preserve the opportunity for a collection system in some of these areas. And I think this came up, as I recall, in our discussion during one of the past Board of Health meetings. One of the Board of Health members may have even asked this question, which I thought was a good question. Should this regulation apply everywhere the same? And I'm not sure of the answer to that. I think that's really up to you. You're the experts. We know we need nitrogen mitigation in all of these watersheds. And my professional opinion is these enhanced INAs hold great promise. They already have what I'll call partial approval from Mass DEP. They have, in fact, they have the second stage. There's 3 stages: pilot, provisional, and general. They've already made it through the first 2. And George Hoyfelder at the Mass Tech Center is monitoring these and writing reports saying that, incredible reports, third-party data saying, yes, they work. So I think it's a viable technology. And as I mentioned to Ryan today, to me, the worst case situation is to continue to put Title V's in the ground, because we know, I think we all know, that all of these watersheds are already over capacity. So every Title V that goes in, it makes the challenge of fixing it a little bit more challenging.
Right.
And so at some point, the town, in my opinion, my advice, and I really mean this, at some point, the town needs to make a decision on turning the tide a little bit and going in a different direction. And I do think, unless the town wants to commit to a town-wide sewer, which would certainly solve the problem at pretty significant expense, I think the next best thing are these INA technologies. And I do agree with Ryan, the 19 milligrams per liter won't solve the problem alone, which is why I'm really focused on this enhanced INA program. I think because it's provisional, I'm not sure that it's advisable to require it at this point. But I think the incentive, the subsidy, is a good way, a fair way, to give property owners the option to make the right decision. And it gives the opportunity for the town to weigh in on those decisions for the public good. And in this case, I think it's the better technology that I think most of us would agree has a much higher probability of solving the problem. So I still believe that this program we're recommending is a good program. I think that this suggestion of setting aside some areas for further study is fine, is very reasonable. And I don't see it holding up the program. I think you could go ahead with the regulation and the watershed plan and write this regulation, adopt this regulation, start working on all. I mean, if you look at the map, these highlighted areas are relatively small geographic area of the watersheds. So the program could still go ahead and during phase one, provide some flexibility. Again, it's your option. I just put this out before you. I think Ryan had some very good points. And Ryan, as we all know, Ryan puts a lot of time and effort into this, and we all appreciate that. So I think we should consider all the options. But I do agree with you, Hillary, that these projects can be difficult to pull off, especially on private land.
I guess yeah, and my worry is that we don't have a Willow Bend. Wellfleet's never going to get a Willow Bend, right? Like, let alone
I'm
out
not
here,
sure you want one, to be honest with you.
let alone out here in the Cove, right? Like, we're
Right.
never going to get a Willow Bend. And, you know, I know a lot of these property owners because they're also in wetland jurisdiction, and I can't envision them saying, sure, let's load up the wastewater and let's put that on my lot. So
Yeah.
without serving them drinking water too, I mean, it's such a shifting around of things
Stretch.
that I wonder if it's possible. And I feel like we could check out its validity in well under 5 years. I mean, I don't, DEP is not going to give us 5 years to look at other options. You know,
Hillary, just to be clear, what I'm suggesting is if you do want to include these areas, and again, that's totally up to you. This is not my recommendation at this point. This is something that I think I just wanted to put before you as an option, but I don't think it would need to hold up the process of the watershed permit, because the watershed permit by its own nature is meant to be an adaptive management planning process, meaning let's move forward. I was a consultant to Paul Neswicki at the Cape Cod Commission, and Paul's a visionary, I think. I respect him tremendously. And one of the things he said over and over during 208 is we need to be directionally correct. And what he meant by that is let's get going. Let's get going in the right direction. Let's not, we've been studying, I've been working on the Cape for 35 years. We've been studying this wastewater issue for longer than I've been working here, more than 35 years. What Paul's saying, and I think what DEP wants, is let's get going. Let's develop a plan that has options, has flexibility. Yes, we can do more. We will always be doing more study, always. But let's start. I think that's, and I really subscribe to that. I think DEP wants that. I think that's what the 208 plan is about. So I think these options are perfectly fine. I don't see them, we don't need to, you're right. We could do this in less than a year, but I would view, that doesn't mean we need to hold off in the targeted watershed plan for a year, I don't think. Because as you can see from this map, these are relatively small areas. So I don't know. I leave it up to you in terms of, and the town, obviously, you're the client, you're the experts. I'm just providing advice. I'm not making any decisions, but I think we can live with all of this. I think it's all good. I think the more input, the more creative, thoughtful input, the better.
So if I may, just because I'm going to have to go really soon, some of the areas I was recommending are not necessarily the coastal areas. You have an area like at the town line. You have the movie theater, you have 2 motels, 2 trailer parks, and then over the Eastham line, you have another large motel. To me, I mean, that's a significant amount of flow. That's a lot of wastewater. And there's plenty of land there. I'm sure that, you know, I don't know how it would be worked out, but I'm sure it could be worked out where we would take advantage of that space and install a system that services those large users as well as some of the adjoining properties. There are other locations in Wellfleet similar to that where we have, you know, large commercial businesses that have we have concentrations of large commercial businesses with a large amount of flow and in close proximity to residential areas. So in those areas, it would make a whole lot of sense to have clusters within that given area. And usually there's not a significant land issue because either there's parking lots or in some of the locations there is town land. So that's all I would say to keep in mind. So thank you.
I would like to offer one other thought here that I learned at the last meeting when Kurt and I see Kurt wants to speak too, so I don't want to hog the microphone here, Kurt. But in our last meeting with DEP and Brian Dudley and Millie Garcia Serrano, they made it clear that the permit that they might issue to the town would be for 20 years, but that would be renewable, and that there's no reason that the plan has to be 20 or 25 years. In fact, Barnstable originally, not long ago, had a 60-year plan, 60-year plan. So my point in saying this is the ultimate implementation of all of this is going to take a very long time. Everybody's in agreement with that. Nobody's suggesting it's going to happen in 5 years or 10 years. And the reason I'm saying this is the ideas that Ryan's putting out here are good ideas, and they might happen next year. They might happen in 10 years. They might happen in 20 years. In other words, a business, and I don't know, you may not have a Willow Bend ever, but you might have some other kind of business that might surface as a good opportunity to build one of these, to design one of these cluster systems. And I think the town should be flexible to that. I think that's a good idea. But I think it's really hard to predict and depend on the viability of those options at the beginning of this, let's say, 30-year planning period. But Kurt, maybe I'll, through the chair, see if you want to add anything else.
Can you hear me? Am
Barely.
I unmuted?
Yeah, we hear you.
Oh, okay, thank you. I wasn't sure. I actually, I think I am for this. I think it's a good idea. I share, both Hillary and Scott's concerns about feasibility. And I think to Ryan's point about, certain locations, whether it's the theater or other locations, I think we had a perfect example with 95 Lawrence. There was an opportunity that arose. We had the wherewithal and the vision to dive right in there. We got a Cape Cod Commission grant. We studied that and we were able to come up with a solution. And I think that's kind of how I would see, additional systems like that coming to fruition. With regard to the regulation, I wouldn't want to let the, sort of the perfect be the enemy of the good. I think Ryan's idea here is great. I love it. I think it's a great idea. And it's definitely a tool that we want in the toolkit. But with regard to the regulation, I think I just look at it the same way we're looking at the potential for a sewer system and say, if somebody wants to come along and put in an enhanced IA tomorrow, we don't want a Title V going in there. And so to do the enhanced IA regardless, especially when it's in areas that are proximate to the water, there's both a watershed benefit and there's also a drinking water benefit by putting in an enhanced IA, and we wouldn't want to stop that. So my only comment would be that we just kind of, leave the regulation the way it's written. If you want to add, cluster as, an exception there, I'm not sure it's necessary, but I do agree that it makes a lot of sense to keep in the toolkit cluster systems where viable, and that we continue to evaluate locations where we could install them. I mean, that makes perfect sense.
Thank you. Hillary, anything else you want to talk about this?
Ken, can I ask a question, Ken?
Yeah, go right ahead, Nick.
Scott and Kurt, what do you think about the notion of cesspools being failed systems? And we should act rather soon on eliminating them.
Well,
Something we could do now, maybe.
Yeah, and again, I think I understand the town has been talking about wanting to do that. I think there's a lot of sense to that. I agree with what Hillary said earlier, that I know Emily's been quite involved in some of our meetings, and I really respect her tremendously. So I think the consistency of what they're doing up there makes a lot of sense. But again, to me, that's an opportunity. If you're going to ask somebody to dig up their yard, hire an engineer, get a permit, finish it off with landscaping, while you're doing that, why not get that magic box in the ground?
No, exactly. I mean,
that's my thought. My whole thesis for this recommendation has been watching other towns go through the pains of, digging up all their streets, putting in a sewer and shutting everybody down and requiring this at significant expense. And I'll add, in some areas, it is the right solution. I really agree with that. Hyannis makes a lot of sense. Provincetown, absolutely. But in some areas, I'm not sure that's the best solution. And therefore, my thesis has been, why not craft something that can piggyback on a redevelopment, expansion, upgrade program
Right.
that you're dealing with already, and homeowners. I'm a homeowner too, you know, and I get it. It's expensive. It's a pain in the butt. So why not design something that can, so I think, a long answer to your question, I apologize, but I think
That's
the
all right.
fact that you're looking at cesspool upgrades, which I think is a good idea, why not tie that into this program? Because the pain to the homeowner is going to be substantially less than doing it twice.
Just
Right.
another thought too, we could also amend the regulation to maybe give that 20-year clause to a cluster system that comes along as well. Just so
Yeah.
that it would have 20 years to transfer onto that. But when they're sizing it, they would size it to accommodate that house into the future. So just, you know,
Right. All right.
Jan, you got anything?
No, not right now. I got a lot to digest,
Yeah.
You know, I agree with Ryan to a degree about, down by, Maurice's, the campground, the possibility of you putting something in there. The other locations that you have here highlighted, I think it'd be very hard pressed to find anything where you could put in a cluster system. It's a nice thought, and I agree with that, but we've looked into this and we've thought about that. We've mulled it around the last few years, haven't we, Hillary? About the idea of cluster systems, and to get a bunch of homeowners to agree to anything. We had two homeowners that couldn't agree to anything a few months ago about where a system could go. So it's gonna be hard pressed, but it's a good thought process, and we can continuously look at this.
All right.
All right. We all set with that? I want to thank you, gentlemen.
Just,
Thank you for
may
your
I-
time.
Yeah, no, thank you very much.
Thank-
Just one thought, and you know, apropos what Janet just said, we would love to come back at another meeting, hopefully before the town meeting, to kind of go through the proposed warrant articles that piggyback with what Scott has presented tonight, and you know, seek your, you know, either a recommendation for or against, you know, those articles, and we, you know, it would take probably about a, you know, half an hour to 45 minutes to go through those, I think. But anyway, we would appreciate an opportunity to be able to come back and at least seek your recommendation, or not your lack of a recommendation, on those warrant articles as well.
Okay, well,
Reasonable.
Hillary, you're muted.
I was just gonna say, we meet on the second Wednesday of the month, so I would pen this in if the board is in agreement for our next meeting, which would be June 9th. If we could have a joint meeting with the wastewater committee.
Okay, I think it'd be beneficial to everybody, because I haven't seen the warrant.
Is that
I don't-
enough
in the
Together.
article
Is that
at all.
time?
So
Okay.
It's 5 o'clock.
I
Is
think
that
we could do it in less than 45 minutes too.
Now, what I'm thinking about, is that enough time for the warrant? I mean, to get recommendations and any.
Well,
change-
actually, to be honest, the warrant is going to the printer next Friday.
Yeah, no, it's fine though, because the moderator is going to have recommendations that come in that he'll announce at town meeting. So that's not a problem. It
I
won't be
know that,
printed.
Kurt, but it's not always good for the participant to get, you know, bombarded with lots of verbal stuff and stuff. So, okay.
Yeah, I know, we are where we are. It is what it is. It's tough.
Mhm.
All right, well, thank you,
Great.
gentlemen. We'll see you next month then, I guess.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, any other new business, Hillary?
Nope, our COVID cases are way down. All the guidance and guidelines are being rolled back, so it's gonna be interesting. As we move ahead, our vaccine rates are good, as far as our locals are concerned, and we're gonna move ahead and see what happens, but I think we're in good shape.
And is the swap?
Thank you, Hillary.
still open, Hillary?
No. I talked to Mark, I talked to Mike, I talked to the trash queen of Cape Cod, and none of the swap shops on the Cape are open. Matter of fact, very few in the state are open. So everyone was in agreement, including the recycling committee, to hold off a bit longer. So we're gonna hold off a bit longer and see if we can get it to open, you know, sometime this summer. So
Okay,
Thank
sounds
you.
great.
Hey, can, anybody want to approve, well, we can't approve the minutes, so that's gonna have to wait. I wasn't there, so, again, I apologize for being, it's hard. I'm retired, it's hard to get to the phone or the computer sometimes, so, sorry about that, so. All right, so, anything else? All right, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right,
Nick,
Okay, thank you.
all right,
okay.
bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.